This is not a podcast about being broken, although you may have been. This is a podcast about strength for women who find themselves in difficult relationships, including that sometimes difficult one with yourself. We'll look at your relationship through a lens of psychology, faith, and a little dash of my own kind of feminism. We're not fixing them, we're fixing you, and that changes everything. Welcome to Stronger in the Difficult Places. Save yourself, heal your relationships. Listen in. Hello, I'm your host, Dr. Zoe. Welcome to Stronger in the Difficult Places. Today's topic is healing from the trauma of relationship breakdown with my guest, Emily Bridget Taylor. So Emily Bridget Taylor is a poet, an artist, a writer, and a teacher from Perth, Western Australia. Her words and imagery are inspired by honey-filled days of light and love and the dark hours between the duality that is life's gift. Emily began sharing her poetry in 2021 on Instagram for the first time, and what followed was a surprising magical journey in which her words and images took flight in all different corners of the world, connecting specifically with women. Soon after, in 2022, Remedy, her debut poetry collection, was released, and Remedy soon turned into more than just a poetry book. It turned into a 30-minute spoken word show set to music. Her artistic intention and calling is to pen words that heal, inspire, and shed light on women's stories, especially those that have been silenced or shamed. But first up, my win and my fail, and I'm going to make this fast because it's a long episode. So my win is that I am leaving town in a couple of days and I am already packed, almost completely. There might be a couple of things I need to put in that bag in my suitcase, but I'm packed, and that is so good for me because I'm a last minute do everythinger. So I'm learning. So that's my win. My fail, so I think I might have talked about this before, but I have become a volunteer with my daughter's scouts, and I have not yet gotten my fingerprinting stuff done and a couple of other trainings that I need to complete. And it is a fail because I keep intending to do it and I don't, but I don't know what in the world I've gotten myself into. Seriously though, the Scouts is a wonderful organization and I can already see that it's benefiting my daughter, but it's another thing that I'm doing and I want to do it because it's good bonding time with my daughter. It's an excellent opportunity for mentorship. But I'm certainly failing on getting all the things that I need to get done to fully operate in this position as volunteer. So that's my fail. And my goal when I come back from being out of town is to take care of it. And so with no further ado, listen in for healing from relationship breakdown trauma with Emily Bridget Taylor. Emily, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad we made this happen because we have been trying to get this interview for so long. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here, Dr. Zoe.
And so you are coming in from Australia. I believe that you are the furthest podcast guest I've ever had, and we had to make the time to work. What's it like in Australia right now? How's the weather?
Yeah, so I am broadcasting from Australia. It is very, very hot right now.
Wow.
So in Australia, we deal with Celsius and you guys deal with Fahrenheit. So I
Right.
think it works out to be about just under 100 Fahrenheit.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
so our Christmas and holiday season feels really different.
Right.
And a lot of it is spent at the beach and doing a lot of things in the sun. So very, very different. I actually would love to experience your version of Christmas. It looks very cozy.
Oh, yeah. Right now in the US, we're having so many storms and it's cold in so many places. I'm in California, so it's not quite like it is on the East Coast, but yes, that's definitely a different kind of version than we have
Mm,
here. So today we're going to talk about healing from relationship breakdown trauma. Could you
mm,
share your story and how this
mm,
relates to you personally?
absolutely. So I'm definitely going to acknowledge that it's so hard at times to summarize these
Yes.
big things. And I think like for any listeners that do have a story, you'll understand that it's like, where did it begin and where does it
Yes.
end? And where am I in the middle of this? But I'll definitely do my best to explain and talk about a relationship that went wrong. And it was my married relationship and the process of healing from that um, experience. So I met my ex partner, my ex husband now in my early 20s.
Hmm.
And it was very much a experimental time for me. interestingly, it was around the time my own parents were divorcing. And
Mm,
I sometimes think, like, was the pain of that something that made me sort of look for relationships that weren't necessarily bad, but also perhaps weren't the most beneficial choices for me? I don't know. Like, that's an interesting question to ask ourselves. Like, what experiences are going on in the grander context of our lives around the times we meet certain
mhm,
people? It's
mhm.
interesting. So I met my ex-husband in my early 20s, and we formed a relationship, and that relationship went for a long time. After 6 years of dating each other, we did get married. And around the time of us getting married, I did have some notion that there were some things that may cause us some difficulties in the future. But I also had a lot of optimism. And I
Mhm.
think people do go into marriage thinking, yeah, like it's never going to be perfect, but we both love each other, and we both have every intention to make this a great relationship, and
Absolutely.
we connect, we have so many good memories together. So I went in knowing that there were some things that might be things we needed to work through, but I also went in knowing that I had seen over the years we'd been together positive growth. I
So
went into
can I
it that
stop you there
way.
for just a second? Because I wanna hear this process. So 6 years
Mm,
is a long time to date, and in six
it is.
years, you got to know him pretty well. But
Yes.
what I'm hearing is that almost already, and I could be wrong, so you can correct me. I'm already hearing one of the quintessential mistakes that women make when entering a
Yep.
marriage is that he has potential. Like, I see
Yes.
some growth, and so you marry potential instead of marrying the man who actually has all the qualities that you want.
Yes. Anyone listening, please do not do that. Please
Hmm.
do not do that. Like, if you find yourself nodding and thinking, that's how I feel about this person I'm going to marry, maybe really think about that. Because, yes, I was going into it, and I can now see, with the hindsight and the learning that I've done, that
Hmm.
I was going in with an attitude of they will change
Yes.
and they will get better because they've already incrementally gotten better. And also, to like even think about that word better, often it's you wanting that person to change in a way that you prefer or
Yes.
that you think is objectively better. But
Hmm.
it's interesting that everyone has their own version of that. And
Hmm.
so it was, I think, hopeful, aspirational, but sort of in the end, something that it doesn't work. And you're absolutely right. I think if you're contemplating marrying someone, I think that it's important now with the experiences I've been through to look at them and say, are they good enough? And is this enough right now? Like, have they
If,
got all the
yes,
things right now?
right.
Not like, oh, in a few more years, like they'll be able to earn more, or they'll be able to have more emotionally in-depth conversations.
Hmm.
I doubt it. Like, it's about what's in front of you right now.
Right.
And that's something I've learned.
Right. Asking yourself, is this man the way he is today, the man that I want to be married to for the rest of my life? If he never changes,
Yes.
which you have to assume he won't, can
Mm,
you deal with the qualities? Because everyone has deficits, right? But
yes.
can you deal with the deficits for the rest of your life? Please
Mm,
don't trick yourself into thinking that it will change. So
mm,
excellent. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And there's that
mm-hmm.
statement, I probably said it on my podcast before, that women marry men expecting them to change and they don't, and men marry
Mm.
women expecting them not to change and they do. And
Whoa.
I believe there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, I've never heard that before, but I really resonate with that for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so sorry for the interruption.
No,
So
not at all.
you chose to get married even though there were those little
Mm,
signs that you saw.
mm. And I think also, like, something that I'd like to talk about as well is some of the pressures around getting married also existed because I was in a Christian context.
Hmm.
And I think that there was also some drive to get married because I felt that we needed to, because we'd already begun a sexual relationship. And I don't
Hmm.
mind saying that on the podcast. And
Hmm.
so I think that there was also some pressure like, well, this is the person you've done that with, you need to now marry them. And I
Right.
think those two things are really linked for a lot of Christian women.
Yes.
And I think like it's a real shame that people will lock themselves into such a significant choice because like with that as a factor. And I wish that I'd had more maturity at the time to realize that it's okay to make mistakes. Don't make a choice that dictates decades of your life based on that. It's just
Absolutely.
it's not actually logical. It's outside the realms of logic. But sometimes like cultural pressure and the social narratives that we hold can erase that logic at times. And I'm not blaming anyone in particular. It's just more a cultural mindset that I think we need to be aware of, especially as if you are a woman that has grown up in a more religious context,
Hmm.
to kind of like go through that way of thinking and question that as well.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you said that. I've spoken
Mm,
before about how I feel the purity
mm,
culture of the Christian culture community has damaged so many women, men also, so many
mm,
marriages in particular. And it's a unintended consequence. I understand the concept of the purity culture. However, my
mm,
beef with the purity culture is it puts the onus on the woman as if the man
mm.
has no control or no, really no responsibility. It's all on the woman, and all the shame tends
Yes,
to be on the woman, and also the
yes,
pressure for the woman to marry as a result. And that's real. And although I believe it's lessening in the Christian church, it
I think so
has
too.
a
Yeah,
long history of causing a
it
lot of
does.
damage. It does. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that people realize sometimes that they're carrying hundreds of years of that cultural conditioning on their
Right.
shoulders when we're making these
Yeah.
decisions. And I do agree with you that things are getting better in that way,
Mm.
that we're leading more with grace, we're leading more with understanding that life and humans are so complicated,
Right.
but it's an ongoing journey, I think, for all of us.
Yes. And I'm going to say this, I don't know if it'll stay in the podcast, but I say it's getting better. But there's a local pastor and church, and there was a girl, young girl, who got pregnant in the church, and he refused to give her well, it wasn't giving her a baby shower. The mom just asked if she could host the baby shower there at the church, and the pastor said absolutely not. And to
Mm,
me, because it's a birth out of wedlock. And,
mm,
he stands very strongly about that. Yeah, it's the same pastor that stands very strongly against abortion and encourages women to keep their children, but
mm.
refuses to celebrate a birth of a child because it's out of wedlock. And that still continues the whole purity culture, women shaming. And it's just that you can't win, you know? And it's still
It's
happening today. And so I do want to just speak out against that. That's not what we're
mm.
talking about today, though. But it's real.
And it's disappointing because those are moments you can never get back. Like
Right.
if someone is actually in that position and actually still wants to bring their child to celebrate their child
Right.
and the pregnancy in the church, that's like an opportunity they've missed
Yes.
to be loving, to be
Yes.
grace filled, and to
Right.
actually retain that person as a member of the spiritual
Yes.
community. It's a huge
Yes.
misstep.
Right. That person and her children, and it just creates a legacy of shame. So anyway,
Mm,
back to the topic. So
mm,
you're sharing your
mm.
story, and so you ended up marrying.
We did.
Hmm.
And the first year of marriage was good and it was also challenging. There were patterns that were coming up that were distressing to me,
Hmm.
specifically in some of the ways that I was spoken to.
Hmm.
And I knew that the ways that he spoke to me sometimes really left me feeling really devastated. Like there
Yes.
were strong words and at the time I didn't know what it was or call it what it was. I only realized what it was later, and that was emotional abuse.
Right.
But at the time, and this is I think where so many Christian women come from, we come from this posture of wanting to do absolutely everything we can
Right.
to fix the problem, to help the person, to sow love into the situation, and to basically accept our cross, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
of this difficulty, and that's what it is, and that's what I signed up for. So there were patterns happening that I know were making me feel really bad, and I would try and deal with those and talk to him about it. But there were definitely repeated situations. I tolerated that and tried to work with it the best I could, because again, like in in my mind, marriage was all important. It was critical that I did absolutely everything, and leaving the marriage or ending my marriage felt like just absolutely another universe. Like that was
Not
just
even
not
a
even on the
realm of
table.
possibility, right?
No,
Mhm.
that doesn't exist. That doesn't
Mhm.
exist for people like me, for people like us. That's not a thing. We
Right.
do not get divorced.
Hmm.
It's like a law. And so I carried that. I took marriage very, very seriously, very seriously. I had always treasured this idea of lifelong marriage. I was one of those, teenage girls that had lots of books on my bookcase of who to
Hmm.
marry and what marriage means in the Bible, and
Yes.
just like really had all of that. Um, and then COVID happened, and during COVID, there were a lot of difficulties that my partner at the time, my ex-husband, had to face, and those difficulties ended up causing a full-scale mental health breakdown.
Mm.
And but but it was a mental health breakdown that was not just caused by the struggles that COVID was creating around us, but it was also a choice to remedy the pain he was feeling with substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, again, I was coming in from this posture of how can I help? And I've realized now that I think that we all bring some of our childhood conditioning to these
100%.
relationships.
Yes.
And I had a parent figure that always wanted my help, almost to the like an emotional support from me, to
Hmm.
the point of like, I think the term is actually sort of parentification,
Yes,
like
that's
when a
correct.
child sort of
You were
becomes the parent.
parentified. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that my my ex-partner was really reminiscent of that parent figure that had
Mm.
asked for so much help. And so it was just kind of like hardwired into me
Right.
that I see pain, I see someone that needs help, I will help. So when the substance abuse was happening, because actually I'm going to talk about what it was, because it was cannabis.
Hmm.
That's something that has been legalized in various different states and
Right.
different places in the world. And so for a very, very long time, rather than holding true to my absolute knowledge that this substance was actually destroying him, because I
Hmm.
just knew, I could see
Right.
it,
Yes.
rather than holding on to that inner truth and absolute knowing, I was being manipulated by him to believe that it was healing him,
Mm.
that it was helping him, and that I was actually too much of a conservative, or too much
Prude.
of a, yeah, basically,
Yeah.
to understand its healing powers, and I needed to change my attitude towards it. So you can kind of see the environment I'm in, like it's just sort
Absolutely.
of like a bit of a head spin. And
Gaslighting. Hmm.
so yeah totally. um but eventually it got to the point where the substances and his existing issues were so problematic that I got to a point where I thought to myself, I actually don't feel safe right now to go to sleep. Like,
Mm.
I was like, I feel nervous about going to sleep right now.
Wow.
And I think that's what was like a thought. I was like, okay, that's probably a sign that I probably shouldn't be here. And it's funny, Dr. Zoe, that I had that thought, but still the next day had to ask a range of professionals their opinion
Yes.
and tell them the things that was happening. Like, I told different authority figures and I told my therapist, and they all looked at me just wide-eyed, and they all said to me like, you need to leave, you need to leave, this is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting that up until that point I had not registered any of the things that were going on as a form of domestic violence,
Mm-hmm.
because to me this person was vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have any work because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
They were mentally unwell. So when you put that mental health piece in,
Mm-hmm.
it sort of really starts to create a guilt response of they're not actually trying to hurt me, they're just really sick. So I need to stay and help them, basically.
That, yes, that is the classic codependent response. And it's also kind of the frog in the pot response.
Mm,
It's so slow and it just
mm.
begins to be the water that you swim in. And so the things that would be super alarming to someone else aren't to you because you've been steeped for so long.
Yes, yes. And it was interesting that, this was the accumulation of a very long period of time. But
Hmm.
then when that lack of safety became just a knowing,
Hmm.
and I spoke to people that in my life that I trusted, and they affirmed that, and that was when a big split in my mind happened of just
Hmm.
like, okay, it's too much now. It's just too much.
Clarity. Yes.
Yeah. And so I was able to separate from that situation. And I essentially gave this person 3 months to go to rehab. Um, and they didn't. And it was just very clear. And it's funny that like in that process of when it got so bad to the point I knew it was time to finish this relationship, it was really interesting. Some people might call it the Holy Spirit, some people might call it other things, but there was like this inner protector that was almost speaking on my behalf.
Mm.
Like I felt almost like there was two of me, not in a weird way, but like I could hear like an inner voice saying to me, no, no, I won't accept this anymore. I will not accept this anymore, and just
Yes.
kind of like it was ringing out of me.
Yeah.
And for anyone that thinks that you've become God's number one enemy for leaving your marriage or leaving your relationship, that right there for me was evidence that that is not true,
Hmm.
because I felt that spiritual, righteous authority in that moment ringing out of me that no, God did not want me to spend the next decades of my life caring for someone that would happily put me in that position through
Hmm.
taking substances and through not listening to sound medical advice.
Hmm.
And no, God did not want me to go to bed feeling unsafe.
Hmm.
And no, it didn't matter that maybe in an additional 3 months they'd be okay, because I had set that boundary and it was a line in the sand that was important.
Mm.
And I think that, especially as Christian women, sometimes we can seriously question all of our reasons for leaving. Was it bad enough? Is a question that I feel like many of us ask ourselves. Did I
Absolutely.
have spiritual grounds to do this?
Hmm.
And I just think that God is empathetic. He
Hmm.
doesn't want two people locked into miserable patterns that is not allowing either of them to heal.
Right.
I don't believe that's God's vision for anyone's life. And I also think that God's plans for us extend so much further and wider and deeper than errors of judgment we've made or mistakes we've made, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And the way I see that relationship now is that it has, it's a funny thing. You sort of can't really regret anything in life, Like I wouldn't say to someone, I regret ever meeting this person or I regret being married to them, because there was a lot of learning that happened for me, a lot of depth that it's given me, more so with learning and wisdom. And I think that Romans 8:28 has become a verse that's been like just a banner over my life, which is God make it, I'm paraphrasing here, but everything in your life that goes wrong, God can turn around for good, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yes.
And out of my learning in that relationship, I've had so much self-revelation and ability to recognize patterns that got me into that.
Mm.
And
So good.
I don't I don't have any hatred towards my ex-partner. And the interesting thing I think that's come out for me, and a painful lesson, is that me marrying someone with an aspirational mindset of how much better they could get was very hurtful to me and very damaging to them.
Absolutely. It's not fair. It's not fair to yourself and it's not fair to them. No.
And I had to realize that me trying to help this person heal was actually not helpful
Hmm.
and really enabling,
Hmm.
even though it came from the kindest of places. Actually, me staying with that person and continuing to lock us both in to
Hmm.
the healer, fixer, and then the victim or the person that's never enough, it would have actually been so mutually destructive.
Right.
And so I think so much resentment would have built up over so many years and so much pain. And
Hmm.
so while like at the current moment, I don't think that that person, I think that that person is still conceives of me as someone that left when things got hard. I
Right.
hope that in time they will see that it was actually better for everybody and that both of us can heal more outside of that toxic dynamic.
Right. And that is his work to do. It's a
Mm,
great hope, and that's his work to do. Well, thank you
mm-hmm,
for sharing your story, Emily. And I know that so many women have a similar story. Obviously, not all the same things are
mm-hmm,
are the same, but I know that that will give some comfort to women who may have been through something
mm,
similar. So, I often say that ending of a marriage
mm,
happens at different times. So
mm,
someone might have a divorce and maybe the marriage ended years before the divorce, or maybe the marriage
mm,
ends years after the divorce, or maybe it never really ends. But regardless of when the marriage ends, there's grief and
mm,
there's trauma involved.
mm-hmm.
And so let's talk about how you healed your trauma, your breakup trauma, and how other women can heal from trauma of a marriage that maybe is ended and they're still very much married, or maybe
Mm,
one that is ended, after
mm-hmm.
a breakup, a divorce.
Absolutely. So the first thing I would say to anyone listening, if you're in that place of your marriage is ending or it has ended, your pain is so valid and it is so painful.
Hmm.
It is so painful. And I just want you to know that God sits with you in that pain and He cares about it. He is not judging you,
Hmm.
He is not angry with you. He actually really has His arms around you and His heart breaks for you, because I think God is so loving. And so that pain is very real. And it it's not something that just has an expiry date. Like, for
Hmm.
example, I have been divorced now for a few years,
Hmm.
and there are absolutely days when I think of this person and I feel sad about it and I feel sad about them. And it's not like a I miss you in a sort of I'm in love with you sort of way. It's more just like you just form an emotional connection with a person who has
Hmm.
seen you and understands you to a certain extent.
Hmm.
And that is there. And I think that the most powerful way I have been able to heal, that there's a number of healing modes that I've accessed. I think we have to realize this all happens in stages.
Yes.
And when things were first happening for me and the grief was really cataclysmic and really huge, there were a few things I did. Like, I actually kept a video diary. So I would
Mm.
film myself on my iPhone talking to myself about how I was feeling, because at that time the breakdown was it was quite dramatic because I was also facing some really intense mental health situations with that person.
Yeah.
So I was kind of just recording my feelings because sometimes our stories can be very dramatic, and there are a lot of people who just won't understand and will
Mhm.
actually feel very overwhelmed by listening
Mhm.
to it. And I understand that it is confronting. So I would sort of record myself to kind of get some of that energy out and talk about my story to myself. And I would also allow myself time to really feel the emotion
Mhm.
in a place of privacy, in a safe place, and actually just letting your body do what it's going to do, because trying to avoid that will just make you feel worse. So if you do need to cry, like I often found like being in the shower really comforting when that was happening, or just being in a private place and letting that out. And then after a while, taking yourself out of that and breathing and going, having some water and doing something else and being like, just normalizing. Okay, I've had to spend half an hour crying. It's actually okay.
Well, I'm going to stop you there because I think the first thing you said about recording your
Mm,
process is so powerful. And we can
mm,
record it through our written word, we can record it verbally. You recorded it video
mm,
as well. Um, it's just a way of validating your experience. And you
mm,
can play it back to yourself or never play it back to yourself because even the process of speaking it or writing it is a way of purging. And so that's so very powerful when you're going through something really difficult. Something that, a lot of times women will say, well, I feel like I don't want to burden my family and my friends because it's so much. And I feel like I'm talking about it all the time and I don't want to burn them out. And although we need to lean on our friends, it's also important for us to do our own purging. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And then releasing, like you said. And I love what you said. Let your body do what it needs to do. So
mm,
many times we hold back and we try to hold in the tears or we try to distract ourselves. And there's a place for distraction, and there's certainly a place for holding in
mm.
tears, but letting your body first do what it needs to do and giving you space to do that is the healthiest thing you can do.
Absolutely. And this is, it's okay that the crying you experience and the grief you experience is not going to be like the few tears you see in a rom-com movie.
Right.
Like I've never experienced my body making those sorts of noises and movements in
Yes,
crying.
absolutely.
Like it was this deep, like wailing grief,
Hmm.
and it at first I felt a little confronted by my own expressions because I was like,
Hmm.
whoa,
Mm.
whoa.
Hmm.
But actually it brought me closer to my own person and my own body and my own expression than ever. And it's made my own self more of a friend to myself in a really
Hmm.
strange way. Like it might be confronting at first, but it's also going to forge a really deep level of self awareness and self compassion and self understanding. So trust that journey and know that you're actually mining for gold there, and it's actually a really beautiful thing. It's really beautiful.
It is. As you were saying that, I was thinking when I finally knew that my divorce was going to happen, and I was still married at the time, but it was kind of my last final um, grief push is the best way that I can describe it. I literally cried. I drove from San Diego to Los Angeles, which is about, or actually where I live, which is about a 3 hour drive. And I
Mm,
cried for 3 hours listening to Adele's song on loop. And
yeah.
it was so exactly everything that you said. It was purging. It was, I don't know if comforting is the word, but it
Mm,
did allow me to just connect with how I felt. And I had that space and quiet in the car to cry for
mm,
3 hours. And it felt
mm.
like such a releasing purge
That's
to allow my
beautiful.
body to do that. And that was kind of for me, it was kind of the close where it was just like, okay, I
Mm,
know, like I've grieved this and I know it has to be done.
that's so beautiful. I'm so glad you shared that. And even like in that process, I would mother myself in a way. Like
That's
I would kind of
beautiful.
like, you can kind of put your hands on your chest or like around your arms and just say like, I'm so proud of you.
Mm.
I'm so proud of you. I'm
Hmm.
sorry, I'm joking up.
No, it's beautiful.
You're so brave. You tried
Yeah.
so hard.
Hmm.
And I think that that is also one of the ways that grief makes you more of a friend to yourself,
Yes.
because there's a second self almost, and maybe it is the Holy Spirit speaking through you, of like just being like, it's okay, you did everything,
Mm-hmm.
you're okay.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So you talked
Mm.
about those things, and then I think I interrupted you. You were going to talk about some more actionable steps.
Yeah, ongoing healing. So
Yes,
I'm a poet, I'm a writer, and I have found that writing has been my just my biggest healer. I mean, I think God heals. I think God's the source of healing, but I think God gives us these mediums to work with that work for us. And
absolutely.
so through my poetry and through my journaling, it's interesting. I'm sort of able to have a sense of more greater closure
Hmm.
because those are my safe spaces to actually express to myself and actually sometimes to that person without ever sending it,
Hmm. Yes.
feelings and expressions I'm having. And that it's also a place like I said, relationships, attachments to people, they are your history. They are your lived
Yeah.
history. They have happened. And it's also a way of sort of writing down this happened. And it's a
Mhm.
memorializing feeling.
That's
And
beautiful.
it kind of like puts a little, a little plaque there. This happened. And it's very it just it brings dignity and honor, I think, to an experience you've had. Because I think people that haven't been through significant breakups or divorces don't understand that yes, your marriage can be over, but your attachment to that person is unending because it just
Correct.
exists, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
I remember someone saying, "Oh, so are you and that person over now?" And I remember it just like kind of stunned me because I was like, "Well, healing and connect, it doesn't really work like that."
Yes.
But yes, we're no longer married.
Right.
So poetry and writing has become a place where I'm able to express my feelings, and it's been really, really healing and really wonderful because I've been able to write books from a place of healing myself to help
Mm-hmm.
others heal. And I think that that's helping others and creative projects are two grief recovery super tools.
Yes. I love that you said that helping others because we know even with depression and grief are twins.
Mm,
We know that with depression, getting outside of yourself and helping others is a way to alleviate depression.
mm,
And then I love what you said. What did you say? This happened. Yes, being able to mark it. And it goes back to that validation. So
mm,
part of your healing was through writing and through writing
mm,
poetry.
mhm,
Do you have a poem that you'd like to share with us?
mhm. I do. I have two. One is what I wrote when my marriage was ending. And I want to read that one because it's important to just acknowledge the grief and the thought process behind that.
Hmm.
And then I'd also like after that like to read a poem that speaks of redemption and recovery, and that it's so you are worth the life that God has designed you to desire.
Hmm.
Um, you are worthy of that. So the second poem is more about that redemption. So this poem is called The Dystopia of Us, and I'll read it now. So this is from my book Remedy. For anyone that's listening who's interested, it's a book of poems, and it is chronicling my journey from a toxic relationship, learning to heal from that. And it's a multifaceted journey. There's romantic poems and there's sad poems, but
Hmm.
my hope is that they're a balm to people that understand what heartbreak really feels like. In the dystopia of us, a cavity grows, deep, wide, and cold within me. The miner is grief, and gold there is none, and all the eyes of everyone bear down like blackened suns. The cavity is a shadow mouth, a dormant spring. Like a garden dead, it withered lies in the hollows of my eyes. Now I see your strange demise through a hanging veil or falling rain, distorting us within the frame. I wear the ghost of you on my lips, in my lungs. I kiss the air and breathe the dust, making love to the mirage of a distant memory steeped in rust and fruitless days that have passed to a nothingness at last.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. I think, I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I think that this poem was examining the feeling of how much shame you
Mm.
carry
Mhm.
when you are in the midst of a marriage breaking down and then divorce. I especially carried a lot of shame, not just on the religious front, but also because I was young
Mm.
and there was so much like, I haven't really put in the hard yards here, but I knew I had that inner knowing this was not right. But it, if you are feeling shame, other people have felt that too,
Right.
and you're not alone.
Right.
And but giving into that shame and just obeying shame over listening to your inner knowing, you don't need to do that. And there's so much life on the other side of that. So this next poem is all about worth, actually.
Mm.
And
Love that.
I think
Yeah.
that I think that stepping away from my relationship, it enabled me to examine my own relationship with self-worth.
Yes.
And I realized that to put up with that situation, I must not have thought that I deserved a lot in life, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of just waited in that and stayed in that. I realized that I needed to come back to a place of believing that I deserved a lot more. So
Right.
this is my poem for people that perhaps need to remember that they are worthy and have so much value, so much inherent value. You were carried here by so many hands, the hands of your ancestors, pouring your life like precious water from cup to cup, passing it forward. And however unsteady their hands were, here you are. So live your life like you are thousands of years in the making.
Oh my goodness, that is beautiful. That is beautiful.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for sharing. And I can see
Oh, you're
how
welcome.
healing that is for a woman who is going through the breakdown of a marriage, or the
Mm,
complete break of a marriage. Emily,
mm, mm.
thank you for your words and thank you for sharing your story. Is there one last word of encouragement you'd like to give to a woman who may feel um, stuck in a difficult marriage, who may have already experienced a breakdown, um, or maybe has
Mm.
already, the marriage has already ended?
I think the two things I needed at that time were grace
Mhm.
and to slow down. And so if you're in that place of just feeling so broken, and maybe you're contemplating your marriage ending, or maybe you're in the really hard yards of making it work, and that's valid as well. You know,
Yeah.
not all relationships need to end. It's only actually.
Hmm. Hmm.
um, if you're in that really hard place of either it's ending, it's not ending, you're trying to make it work, or it's over and you're trying to find yourself again, to give yourself grace in that process, to give yourself love in that process, and to just slow down and be with yourself in that process. These things are not things that happen just overnight or even in months.
Hmm.
And just to hold yourself and understand that you can take your time to figure this out. This doesn't all have to be figured out today, and that there's grace for you. No matter what you choose, there is grace for you.
That is beautiful. I feel like I hardly talked this episode, and that's great because you had so many beautiful, encouraging words of wisdom. And thank you for sharing your poetry with us as well. How can
Thank
people
you so
find your
much.
work?
So I post poetry on TikTok and Instagram, and it's under my author name, which is Emily Bridget Taylor, all one word, no spaces or anything. And then if you would like to have a look at my book Remedy and even pre-order it, you can do that at my website, which is www.emilybridgettaylor.com. Or in at least, I think, about a week, you can type in that title and author name to Amazon, and you should be able to see it for a much better shipping price than what I could offer from Australia. So
Yes,
your
that's
best
great.
friend might be Amazon.
And by the time this episode comes out, it should be live on Amazon. So
Oh, amazing.
thank
That's great.
you. Thank you so much for coming on, Emily, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. It's been a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Stronger in the Difficult Places. Please hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode, and share and review to help others find me too. If you haven't already, go to drzoeshaw.com to sign up for my newsletters to get freebies, quizzes, and encouragement that will help you strengthen your relationships. Connect with me throughout the week on Instagram. I love hearing from you all. Until next time, have a strong week.